Hi, my name's Alden, my partner's Hunter, and today we're going to be discussing the social and political aspects of how transportation has changed throughout the centuries. We're going to start specifically with horse-drawn carriages and then move up through the evolution of cars. We're going to talk over the positive and negative impacts that this is having on both society and the environment as well, and then we're going to discuss the future and where that's going, specifically with self-driving cars and AI into the future.
When cars were first becoming a thing and they were transitioning from horse-drawn carriages to like the evolution and like the start of cars, what were your biggest like social and political takeaways and like the positive and negatives of that?
I would say there's a couple things that come to mind. The first off is how annoying and loud cars were at the beginning, especially with horses. Horses would get freaked out and annoyed really easily. I mean, they're live animals, that kind of makes sense. And when cars were first becoming a thing, they were really loud. And so that transition period where you had both horses and carriages, and then you had the cars as well, was really negative toward the cars. And there were actually a lot of cities that wanted to ban cars at the time because they didn't really see the future of it, considering how loud they were, how expensive they were, and how much they were impacting the horses as well. One big thing that I know about, I read a book called Seabiscuit, which talked about how the cars in San Francisco were really important, and then also the transition period when they became a thing. It was during the fire, I believe it was in 1909 in San Francisco, I could be wrong on that date, and cars were used when horses couldn't be used to transport water, and they were the fire trucks, which really opened up the possibilities of cars and showed the way to the future. There almost had to be that big event that was kind of that flip that stopped focusing on the negatives and focused on the positives instead a little bit.
And then going from like the first stages of cars and like when they're first being produced and made, what do you think the biggest differences they focused on from the first car, what, like the 1860s, 1880s, all the way up until like the early 2000s?
Oh boy, I would say there's a couple different aspects to that. I would start with like the way they were used. Originally, cars were very much used by the wealthy and the rich, or were used in sporting events. They garnered a lot of attention through media, especially through racing. That was how people really got invested in cars. And then the big switch came when they were started to be used both for transportation in the military and then fire and police and all of those aspects, as well as when they dropped the price significantly in order to give more of the common man access to a car, and that was the big transition period, I feel like.
Okay, following what we discussed before about the 20th century, what are your thoughts on how cars are transitioning into the future?
I think cars, the biggest thing that we're seeing right now is the switch from gas-powered cars into electric cars, and how that can be like a huge like positive thing going in the future, especially for the global warming and all the stuff we found about greenhouse gases and how like all this gas is being produced is just warming the earth. And now there's so many cars on the road everywhere. Like there's semis, there's like taxis, Ubers, all sorts of cars, and it's just causing a lot of pollution. And also going away from cars, all the building of new roads and highways all over the world takes a lot of like construction and a lot of like producing of the concrete and asphalt, so that's a huge part too.
Tell me a little bit more about how those roads and highways have impacted the environment, and then also a little bit more about electric cars as well for the future.
Yeah, they've impacted the environment in pretty huge ways. If you think about it, like where we live along like right onside the mountains, and when you're building roads and highways through the mountains, you have to dynamite rock, you have to like construct, dig a lot, and that can take a huge toll on your environment, especially all the animals around it. They can get freaked out, they can move away, like their homes, you can have like bears, mountain lions, all those type of things, their homes can get destroyed, and it's pretty sad to see sometimes. And now we're like seeing highways expand. Like I live in Vale, so on Vale Pass they're making the lane 3 lanes, and it just takes so much construction. And on those type of highways in the winter, every summer they're doing a lot of construction because all the semis are creating such big potholes. So if every summer there's more and more construction, it's not very animal friendly around.
Walk me through some more of what you think is going to happen in the future with electric cars. Obviously, they're not where they fully need to be right now in order to take over. When do you think that might happen, and why do you think that might happen?
I think we're seeing some good change starting to happen like very soon. I think one thing, people are pretty hesitant about buying electric cars. They don't like fully trust them, and it's like hard to like go and charge your car for 45 minutes. So people are still like, I love gas-powered cars. It's really easy to go fill up my car, and they're super reliable with companies like Toyota and Ford. But hopefully in this near future, we can start seeing more electric cars. They're starting to become more cheaper. Hopefully they can start like figuring out how to dispose batteries more efficiently so it doesn't take a big toll on the environment. Now that we just discussed the beginning of cars all the way up until the present, talk to me about the future of cars and how like self-driving cars could be a big thing coming up.
I think there's a lot of problems with them right now, but I think they are going to be the future. It's just a question of when. I think the major problems right now is honestly that people don't trust them. I think that goes back to the original cars with the horses and carriages. People didn't trust them, people didn't know, and now they've taken over. I think that exact same transition is going to happen. It's just waiting for that flip point, like what happened with the Fire. I think a lot of the reasons that they aren't huge today is if someone's driving on the road in a self-driving car or is being driven by a self-driving car and then someone else is driving themselves, the self-driving car is expecting them to react a certain way. Humans are completely unpredictable. The human could do something the self-driving car is not expecting, and then all of a sudden there's a crash. It's not the self-driving car's fault, it's the human's fault, but who is that blamed on in reality? I think people are really scared about that happening. So I think that's a big reason they haven't taken over as much yet.
What do you think are some positives and negatives about self-driving cars going in the future?
I think some big positives on them is it would absolutely reduce traffic first off. The way traffic is formed is by human reaction time being too slow. So someone stops and they see a crash, all of a sudden it's like a snake that moves backward and backward through traffic, and that causes so many delays, causes highways to be so much larger. If we had self-driving cars, we could have a 1 or 2 lane highway because all the cars could start at the exact same time. You could get so many more cars through a light. You don't necessarily need to even have lights because the cars know exactly where every other car is going. That's the issue. Again, the negatives right now is humans are still on the road. I think that's the number one negative of the self-driving cars is humans are unpredictable and they can't assess that going into the future as much.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
All right, let's move away from cars a little bit. Let's talk more about the transportation side of things, especially in Europe where they've got a great public transportation system versus the US where most cities really don't have any form of public transportation, and how a lot of people in the US really drive their cars and expect to be able to have that personal space. You've been to Europe, you've gone through some of those public transportation. Walk me through the positives, the negatives, what your thoughts are on some of that.
Yeah, I think a lot of positives for the public transportation in Europe is people are so used to that being like almost like a normal thing. Like everyone goes to work and goes to different things, like using public transportation, whether that's buses or trains. And I think the US, people just enjoy driving their own cars and they're like, I want my own space. And that's like a huge problem with traffic. And also I feel like people don't carpool as much here. And I think that's a huge issue. In like Europe, the roads are a lot quieter out there. You definitely notice. There's like good train systems, but I think the US really needs to step it up with public transportation and make it more like inviting and more like options, because like you were in like Denver, there's only like the railroad for a train, so it's like it's pretty like, and it's very uncommon for people to use public transportation in the US compared to Europe.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna play devil's advocate to that a little bit too. A big difference I've seen between the Europe and US is the pure size of it. Europe, you can get across almost every single country there, if not the entire thing, within a day or a couple hours, whereas the US, you can drive, Texas is a great example, across all of Texas and drive for an entire day and you can still be in Texas. So I think however much for specific cities, it could be really important for the US to implement more of that public transportation. I think Europe has taken advantage of its geography and done a really good job connecting London to the main central area and all of those aspects. But I think the city aspect could be copied into the US. I just think it needs to be done a little bit differently considering the different geographies of the locations.
Mm-hmm. And especially if we get better with public transportation, that will help on not needing to expand the roads as much, help on traffic. And with like what comes with traffic is more accidents. People are texting on their phones, using their phones, looking at their Apple CarPlay, and they're not paying attention as much. And especially if you're driving in cities, there's a lot of stop and go traffic, and it can come pretty abruptly, and there's just more accidents.
Absolutely.
So that could be, if there's better public transportation, that could lower accidents and lower obviously greenhouse gases.
And on that public transportation too, you also have that extra time where you're not focusing on driving. You can get work done, you can relax, you can have that calm down peace time. Whereas when you're driving, you have to be focused the entire time. So even though we're moving towards the era of self-driving cars where that would become a possibility, we're not there yet. So we're really focused on, I think, adding that would add a whole extra hour to 2 hours in a lot of people's days. However much there's still a commute, it's a very different type of commute and they're not focused on the same aspects anymore.
For sure.
In conclusion, there are a lot of topics that we discussed today. We obviously only briefly touched on a lot of them. That's because, one, there's a lot to go in with all of these. We really encourage you to do your own research, see what works best for you where you live. It changes based on you're in the countryside, where you are, and then also just looking at the past. There's a lot of reasons why all of these happened that we weren't able to go into, but we hope that you learned at least a little bit of something from this video and our discussion today, and we encourage you to ask us questions and do your own research. Thank you very much.